Dobry wieczór. Tutaj William. Witajcie na tygodniowym podsumowanie Polskiej wiadomości Zemne. William Murphy. With the general election in Poland on Sunday, October 13th, now less than 2 weeks away, we thought it was a good time to catch up on the campaign to date and preview the likely outcome. We're delighted to have as our guest this week the Polish political journalist Kasia Sobiepanek. Kasia is normally based in the UK, but is currently on a visit home from where she's speaking with us this evening. Kasia is the publisher and chief editor of the online portal UKpolitics for polsku, as well as being a translator, journalist and international affairs analyst. She's the former head of the Europe and European Union department of the Foreign Affairs portal. Kasia is a graduate of the University of Szczecin, Berlin's Humboldt University, and the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznan. She holds a master's degree in international relations, as well as many other qualifications. The UKpolitics for polsku portal has been operating since 2013 and is the first Polish portal on UK politics and foreign policy. Before our interview proper, Kasia Sobiepanek gave me an update on the Polish electoral system and the main parties contesting the election. The election on Sunday, October 13th, is to both houses of the Polish Parliament, the Sejm, roughly the equivalent of Dáil Éireann, and the Polish Senate or Upper House. There are 460 seats in the Sejm, and Poland uses what's known as an open party list proportional representation system in multi-member constituencies. Seats are allocated using the D'Hondt method, with a 5% threshold for single parties and 8% for coalitions. Listeners may be familiar with the D'Hondt method in terms of the election of the Northern Ireland Executive. So the system is essentially proportional, albeit if certain electoral committees, as the parties contesting the election are known as, fail to reach the threshold, the seats they would have won on a proportional basis are allocated among the successful parties. The Upper House or Senate is elected using a first-past-the-post voting system in single-member constituencies. The Senate comprises 100 members. So in terms of electoral strategy, for the Sejm, the key is to form a bloc or an alliance which will secure a minimum of 8% of the vote for a formal coalition, or 5% for a single party or what's claiming to be a single party. Whereas for the Senate, the key is to form a broader alliance, as the opposition has done in this case, in order to win in a first-past-the-post voting system. In order to secure a majority in the Sejm, a single bloc must win at least 231 seats. It's important to note that this election on October 13th is for the Polish government, not the presidency currently occupied by Andrzej Duda, who will be up for re-election next year. The last Polish general election was held in 2015 and resulted in an overall majority, relatively unusual in Poland, for the currently governing United Right Bloc, which is dominated by the Law and Justice Party, or in Polish Prawo i Sprawiedliwość. There are a total of 10 electoral committees contesting these elections, of whom 5 are registered in all constituencies. The number of the electoral committee on the ballot paper is determined by lot. The order this year is as follows. The first list is the Polish coalition. This comprises the Polish People's Party and UKpolitics primarily. This is regarded as a centrist bloc in Polish politics. List 2 is the governing United Right bloc, primarily comprising Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, plus Agreement, United Poland and the Republican Party. This is currently Poland's main centre-right list. List number 3 is Lewica, or the Left, comprising the Democratic Left Alliance, the successors to Poland's previously governing Communist Party, Spring and Together. List 4 is the right-wing Konfederacja, or Confederation, comprising Korwin and the National Movement. List 6 is the Civic Coalition, Koalicja Obywatelska, Poland's main opposition bloc, comprising Civic Platform or Platforma Obywatelska, the Modern Party, the Greens, the Polish Initiative and others. Current opinion polls indicate that all 5 of these election committees are likely to enter the Sejm by passing the relevant threshold, although it cannot be certain in the case of both Konfederacja and the Polish coalition alliance of the Polish People's Party and UKpolitics. The 5 other election committees are List 6, the right wing of the Republic; List 7, Action of Disappointed Retirees and Pensioners; List 8, Coalition of Independents and Local Government Activists; List 9, Effective; and List 10, Representatives of the German Minority. In terms of a left-right divide, the political landscape in Poland is quite interesting. It's fair to say, though, that overall Konfederacja is clearly on the right. Law and Justice is generally regarded as being a right-wing party, although the party has embraced strong social welfare policies, combined with Euroscepticism. Poland's main liberal bloc will be regarded as the Koalicja Obywatelska, whereas the left in Polish politics is represented by Lewica, primarily comprising the Democratic Left Alliance. As we said earlier, the Polish Coalition, comprising the Polish People's Party, whose support is mainly in rural areas, plus Kukiz 15, will be viewed as being in the centre. The expectation is that Law and Justice will secure an overall majority with the United Right allies, or if not, come very close to it. Should they fall just short, and should Konfederacja pass the relevant threshold, it's expected that would be where they would turn to first for support. Dobry wieczór, Kasia. Dziękuję bardzo za rozmowę z Irlandia.
Dobry wieczór, William. Dziękuję bardzo.
Whereabouts exactly in Poland are you speaking to us from this evening?
So today I am in my hometown in Szczecin, which is in northwestern Poland, about 7 kilometers from the German border.
Maybe you could start by telling us a little more about yourself. I know that although you follow Polish politics closely, you're now based in the UK and have a particular interest in political developments taking place there. And as we all know, there have been very interesting developments there recently.
Yeah, of course. I've been following events in the British politics for the last, 10 years. And as you said, I'm the polsku, which is a website aimed at the Polish community in the UK. And we are trying very hard, actually, to explain the nuances of the British politics to the Polish community. And of course, these days we are mostly focused on Brexit and Brexit. So it's fascinating, and the British politics is much more closer to my heart at the moment than Polish politics. On the other hand, when I look at my hometown and my home country, then it's kind of nice feeling to see that Polish politics at the moment is not as turbulent as the British.
So maybe you could start by providing our listeners with a brief overview and the main electoral committees, as they're known, contesting the polls. And I know there's thresholds as well. I think it's 5% for an individual party and 8% for an electoral alliance. And that sometimes brings about different combinations of parties. So in this year you have the Polish People's Party and Kukiz 15 forming an alliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we basically got 5 major blocks in these elections, and as you rightly said, the threshold for blocks is 8%, and the parties is 5%. But although each of those major 5 blocks is actually a grouping of different parties, some of them are running as one party, some of them are running as a bloc. So you mentioned the Polish coalition, which is a combination of 2 groups, and it's a quite strange combination, many people say, because one of them is a former coalition partner of Civic Platform, so Polish People's Party, and the other one is the party of our very famous rock star, Paweł Kukiz. And he's one of those about whose intentions in politics everybody's clear. So he wants to be the hero of Poland. He wants to change Poland. Maybe he doesn't have a clear plan how to do that, and that's why people didn't really wanted to vote for him recently. And that's why they formed coalition, that strange coalition of these 2 parties. But of course, the 2 main contenders in those elections are the ruling party, Law and Justice, and the Civic Platform under the banner of the Civic Coalition with some smaller parties like Nowoczesna or Modern. And they are going to be, as I said, main contenders. So Law and Justice currently leading the poll, and the Civic Platform on the second position. And there are 2 other blocks running in those elections. So the left party also has a very broad church from the former post-communist parties to the Spring, so the new party of Robert Biedroń, and the radical left-wing Razem, so together. And the last main bloc in those elections is the so-called Confederation. So this is the group which includes the libertarians, so Janusz Korwin-Mikke, and the far-right movement. That's basically how it looks like at the moment.
And I imagine if Prawo i Sprawiedliwość was to fall short of an absolute majority with their United Right allies, that Konfederacja would be the natural place where they would possibly go to look for support to get them over the line.
Yes, definitely, but the question is if Confederation will actually pass the threshold. That's one of the three big questions, I think, of those elections. But yes, they are seen as the allies of Law and Justice. But I'm not quite sure how they actually work together, because when we talk about Law and Justice, of course, they call themselves conservative. They would say about themselves that they are the rather right-wing party. But if you look at their social agenda, that's not something that Janusz Korwin-Mikke will smoothly agree with.
So what have been the main themes of the general election campaign to date? I know that Poland's relative economic success at the moment and the new social welfare programmes that you've alluded to are probably the key to the poll lead enjoyed by the United Right. I note that Prawo i Sprawiedliwość are using the slogan Dobre czas dla Polski, a good time for Poland, as their slogan.
Yeah, Law and Justice is kind of working on their slogan. So formerly we had Dobra zmiana, the good change. And now we have good time for Poland, because basically, as you said, we've got quite good economic conditions at the moment. The situation is quite well. It's partly because of the general economic cycle. It's partly because of the money that we still get from the European Union, so various forms of help for various types of, for example, entrepreneurs and companies, but also a lot of money invested in infrastructure, etc. Of course, Law and Justice also did a lot of things to work well with that. For example, they worked on the loopholes in the VAT issue, VAT tax, and improved it a lot. They also introduced the welfare reforms, which is very popular, as you said. So 500 plus money for children. If for each child you can get 500 zlotys, which is quite a lot if you, for example, compare it to the minimum wage, which is about 1,600 zlotys. So 1/3 of that you get for each child. Previously, it was only for the second and third child. Now, before last summer, they also extended it to the first children. Which become, again, very popular, and it's probably one of the vote winners for them.
And I know earlier this year they announced the so-called Kaczynski 5 pledges, which was essentially a continuation of the social spending programmes of the last period in government.
Yeah, that's true, and again, it's becoming very popular. Generally, that all the parties at the moment agree with, maybe apart from Janusz Korwin-Mikke himself. That's something that is going to stay within Polish politics for years, probably. But Law and Justice also introduced, or is trying to introduce, some boosts for entrepreneurs, like they promised to lower the social insurance, but at the same time they promised to rise the minimum wage. So there is something for everybody. So, for example, this weekend, the main theme of the campaign was the healthcare system, which is also a very difficult issue. So all the parties in opposition, of course, say that Law and Justice is not doing well in that area. Law and Justice is saying something else. There are many problems, waiting lists, waiting time at the A&E department, and the care for the elderly, and a lot of challenges in that area for the future. We will see how it goes.
Well, Kasia, that healthcare issue certainly sounds very familiar to someone resident in Ireland. I think the health services tend to be a challenge the world over.
Yeah, definitely. And with Poland, the problem is that many young people actually left the country and live, for example, in Ireland or in the United Kingdom, Germany, or any other country. And there are many elderly people. More and more people are simply getting older, and somebody needs to care for them. We also have problems with nurses, doctors, etc. And healthcare always needs a lot of money, and you need to take this money from somewhere to bring it back to the healthcare system if you want to improve it. And that would be a challenge for basically every party in probably every country in the world.
I know the campaign hasn't gone entirely to plan for Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, in that there have been 3 major controversies. You've had the resignation of the Sejm Speaker, Marek Kuczynski, over his alleged misuse of official flights. You've had the allegations against the now resigned Deputy Justice Minister, UKpolitics, of involvement in a campaign to discredit judges who were critical of the government's controversial judicial reforms. And just last week, you've had a major controversy around the personal assets declaration of the President of the Supreme Audit Office and former Finance Minister Marian Banish. Have any of those issues significantly impacted on the campaign and Pravo I Sprawiedliwości's support?
If you look at the polls, that may be a bit something, but not necessarily. Those three scandals and some smaller ones also seem to be a very popular issue on the one hand when you look at the media. On the other hand, it doesn't really, it's not really reflected in the polls. So Law and Justice is still enjoying a support of between 40 and 50% of the electorate according to those polls. And I think personally that the issue behind that is that polls do believe that all politicians are corrupt. Probably that's the case for politicians everywhere anyway. But on the one hand, it sounds when you read about those scandals, it sounds outrageous very often. But on the other hand, people say, okay, everybody is like that. Every politician is going to be like that. So we are not going to care so much about it. Yeah. We are happy with, for example, social welfare reforms, and that's it.
Yeah, and in the interest of balance, I think it's fair to say that there were many kind of similar allegations during the time of the actual previous government as well. So it's certainly not unique to the present administration. On a wider note, there has been much focus abroad about Poland's strained relationship with the EU, especially over the so-called rule of law issues. Has that strained relationship found itself into the political discourse much in Poland in terms of the campaign?
I think not so much, because first of all, we are a very pro-EU country, a very pro-European country, and even Law and Justice, which is using a very strong language against the European Union, maybe not that strong, for example, in Britain, but still it's strong. Still, they say that they are very pro-European, and they of course want to stay in the European Union. There is no question of that. And the other thing is that very often, they say one thing in Poland and they do the other thing in Europe. So yes, there were many controversies, especially about the judicial reform, and there was some kind of negative language about the European Union at that time. But when we come closer to the elections, you can see the change in rhetoric of Law and Justice. And they are much more pro-European in their language.
Have environmental issues featured much in the campaign? I know that Poland has faced some criticism internationally over its green record, especially in terms of its coal industry, criticisms which have been strongly rejected by the present government.
Yeah, the environmental issues are getting more and more popular in Poland, and it's not as controversial thing as, for example, LGBT rights. But every government, and Law and Justice especially at the moment, has this problem that on the one hand, Polish economy still pretty much depends on coal, and we also export a lot of it, so we simply get money out of it. There are also many jobs. Recently, they have opened a new mine as far as I've seen. And there is also a lot of traditions behind that. So it's a difficult issue in Poland, thorny issue. But yes, you're absolutely right that the pro-environmental movements are getting stronger, but still they are much more associated with the left-wing politics, maybe with the central group. Law and Justice here is definitely on the back footing.
Conversely, does the government's support of the coal industry play well electorally in the regions of the country where the coal industry is a major employer? I imagine it would.
Yeah, definitely. As I said, a lot of jobs depending on coal at the moment, not only in the mines themselves, but also in supply chain. So, yeah, it's a vote winner.
I know that earlier this year in Poland there was a major teacher strike. Will that have led to any loss of support by the present government?
Again, if you look at the polls, you'll probably say not really. If you talk to people who work in education, they will definitely say yes. So we were expecting to have another run of those teachers' strike in September. But educational reform is one of the, I would say, lower points of Law and Justice because simply, first of all, there was a big chaos, and there is still big chaos if we look at, for example, high schools, when we have much more children than last year, for example, and not every school is prepared for that. There's been some chaos in communication of those reforms, and of course there is also the issue of money, so teachers not really earning much. The problem with teachers who have to work in 3, 4, 5, or I know personally a teacher who works in 7 different schools at the same time, of course, and have to go around being in 7 different schools every week. So it's very difficult, and there are problems in this area. But again, if you look at the polls, it's not necessarily affected the ratings of law and justice.
So in terms of the personalities of this campaign, I know that Koalicja Obywatelska have nominated Małgorzata Kidawa-Błońska as their prime ministerial candidate. Has the nomination of Kidawa-Błońska made any difference to the race or given any momentum to the opposition? It sounds not by the opinion polls. And how controversial a character does Jarosław Kaczyński remain?
Yeah, so we have this very strange situation with leadership in both Law and Justice and Civic Platform. So starting with Law and Justice, we've got this kind of triumvirate of on the one hand, the Prime Minister, on the other hand, we've got the leader of the Law and Justice Party, so Jarosław Kaczyński, and we also have the President, and Andrzej Duda. So always there is the same question, who is actually running the country? And everybody will tell you that it's probably Jarosław Kaczyński still, although it, of course, has been changing a bit. He's getting older, and the other people would like to replace him. Mateusz Morawiecki is doing very well as the Prime Minister in terms of his personal ratings and ratings of the party in general. So I suppose he will stay in office if Law and Justice gets good results. Maybe if there is some kind of spectacular catastrophe, which we are not expecting, something will change. But as I said, I don't think so. On the other hand, when you talk about Civic Platform, Grzegorz Schetyna, so the former leader, definitely was not popular. The thing is about him that he is a great campaigner within the party. He is a great organizer. He would be a great whip in a British government, for example. But he doesn't have this connection with people. This is generally the problem of the Civic Platform, that they have this problem of being out of touch with reality, out of touch with ordinary people, and Law and Justice is doing pretty well there.
Okay.
So Grzegorz Schetyna decided to step aside and leave this post for Małgorzata Kidawa-Błońska. And yes, when you look at the ratings, she is much more popular than he is. But still, I think in this case, it's not the problem of who is at the helm of the party. It's the general problem of the image of the party as the party out of touch with ordinary people. And Law and Justice, whatever you say about what they do, they definitely can find this connection with ordinary people, and that is, again, a vote winner for them.
Okay, so after the surprise result in the Brexit referendum in the UK, and indeed the surprise election of Donald Trump as the President of the US, what's the likelihood of an upset result in Poland? Or is the only open question being whether the ruling bloc secures an absolute majority or not?
Yeah, I just think that's the first question. So how big majority they will get. And I think it's going to be quite a big majority for them. And I don't think, as I mentioned at the beginning, when I look at the British politics, we've got a lot of controversies every day. Every day is very hot in terms of the atmosphere of the political debate. In Poland, it is much more calm. In Poland, we have very structured campaigns. In Poland, I think we can say that we know everything. We know who is going to win. We know who is going to be in the second place. Maybe we don't know how many parties will actually go into parliament, whether it's going to be 5 or maybe 3 parties. Maybe there will be some kind of attempts to form a coalition of the opposition. But as far as I know, and as far as some experts, polling experts told me, Law and Justice is going to win those elections, probably with a big majority.
So finally, is there anything that you would like to tell our listeners about the campaign that has particularly caught your eye that we haven't covered so far?
There is one thing I always want to tell everybody who can take part in those elections. Please, please, please register to vote. Go and vote. If you're a Polish citizen, of course you can do. And if you live abroad, you can register at the local consulate and you can vote in these elections. Please do. If you don't know who is the best option for you, then try to find some information. These days you can find a lot of information online. You can listen to Polish radio station, you can watch Polish TV, although maybe that's not the best choice. But you can go online, you can find information about candidates and vote. And vote, because that's the only way we can change something in politics for the country.
Well, that's certainly a very good note on which to end. Thank you again so much, Kasia, for your time this evening. I would highly recommend that our listeners check out the excellent UKpolitics polsku website. As Kasia was saying, it's important for eligible Polish nationals, including those resident in Ireland, to vote in the general election on Sunday, the 13th of October. Full details of the voting arrangements can be found on the Polish Embassy Facebook page and website. Registration is available up until the 10th of October, and voting will be possible on the day in 8 polling stations in 5 cities, which are as follows. In Dublin, at the Polish Embassy, 5 Aylesbury Road, Ballsbridge, Dublin 4. At Dom Polski, 20 Fitzwilliam Place, Dublin 2. At O'Connell Secondary School, Polska Akademia Wiedzy, North Richmond Street, Dublin 1, and at the Ambassador's Residence, 12 Aylesbury Road, Ballsbridge, Dublin 4. Outside the capital, the locations are in Cork, the Together Rasm Centre, Unit 2A, Kilnap Business Park, Old Mallow Road; in Donegal, Errigal College, Polska Szkoła, Windy Hall in Letterkenny; in Galway, Polska Szkoła Szymborskie, Holy Trinity National School, Walter Mackin Road, Merview; and in Limerick at 66 O'Connell Street. Voting will take place from 7 a.m. in the morning until 9 p.m. at night. Voting is allowed only in person. On Hello Irlandia, we'll of course be following the rest of the election campaign and the results closely. Tá všetko na čin. Zapraszam na kolejny posłuchowanie z tydzień o tej samej